the general manager of the Farmers Union Milk Marketing Cooperative, headquartered in Wisconsin, and for the past several years as secretary and chief economist for the National Farmers Union. He's also a farmer. Bob and his wife own a farm in Wisconsin, and he came from that farm to be with us today. I think he calls his wife the farmer, but I think he's got some kids to help out with it. Bob has been one of the leading exponents in the plan to establish a new international wheat agreement between the Canadians and the United States and the other wheat-producing countries of the world. Bob helped arrange the meeting between the Canadians and the U.S. senators up in Winnipeg, Canada, a few weeks ago. And in that connection, we have a senator from Canada who will be on the program at our convention Tuesday night, Senator Hazen Argue, who is the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee up there in Canada. And I'll tell you, if you want to hear a fellow who knows what needs to be done to get the price of wheat up at an international level, I want you to be there and hear that and take the story home. But it's now my honor and pleasure to introduce the National Secretary of the National Farmers Union and Farmers Union's Chief Economist, Bob Lewis.
Thank you very much, Ben. You're generous as always, and I particularly appreciate that you missed the opportunity to point out that this chief economist has no Indians. I want to be sure to get this up high enough so I don't talk over your heads. It's always a particular delight when you have been around as long as I have, and I have been around as long as Ben says, although I don't really like to count the years anymore, to have a chance to come and meet young people. Because we can always hope that the young people haven't been discouraged by all the trying and hoping and fearing and failing and occasional succeeding that sometimes gets us old codgers down. So when I got here to this crowd and started looking over them, looking over all of these smiling young faces, I was delighted to see some fairly familiar young farmers, Dwayne and Betty Mortensen, Adam Siegel, Leif Lunder here, and Bob Fortner, George Levine. And I asked Ben about how some of them looked a little bit worn for being young farmers. He explained to me he had a terrible drought here a year or so ago that hit some of you particularly hard and gave you a hard time in a very big hurry. But I'm glad that some of the people that I can see in this crowd have don't show quite as much wear and worry as some of the rest of us do. I want to talk a little bit about the fix we're in as farmers. And my point in doing that is that you haven't been here very long, you young farmers, so please forgive me if I repeat something you know as well as I do. And another thing that is also even more important to you is that you've got a lot longer to be here, worrying about these things than some of us old-timers. So you're going to have to sweat it out, and I think maybe it would be not inappropriate to kind of diagnose the problem, diagnose how we got into it, and then try to give you some ideas, at least to get you started figuring out how to get out of the fix we're in. Well, first of all, the tough fix that farmers are in this country. Farm prices received by farmers in the last 3 years have been the lowest in real purchasing power of any time since before Franklin Roosevelt was elected president. That goes back a long, long way for any one of us here. And a bushel of wheat now will buy less any time in the last 3 years than any time before the worst of the Depression. Prices received by farmers in the United States are among the very lowest in the world. Very few farmers are getting prices as low as ours here in the USA. And this, of course, is particularly true with grain. My wife and I and our daughter are in the cattle business in Wisconsin, not the kind you have to milk every day. We leave the calves with them, just like most South Dakota ranchers do. But I'm going to be talking primarily about grain. And I want to apologize to all the other cattlemen here, and dairy farmers, and anybody else, hogs, because grain is the foundation, the economic foundation of the whole agricultural industry. And so, when we talk about grain, it doesn't mean that we're ignoring the livestock and poultry industries at all. But we're talking about the fundamentals. And believe me, a surplus of cheap grain is going to result in a surplus of cheap pork and cheap beef someplace down the road. It's just a matter of time. So when we talk about grain just for shorthand purposes, forget us and just keep thinking about your own situation a few years out in front of the grain farmer. Prices received by our farmers do not cover the cost of production. Now that is more serious to the country and to you young people than simply losing money for a year or two. I'm particularly sensitive to this because I've just spent a weekend with my daughter who is raising beef cattle in Wisconsin. And like many young farmers, she needs more land. She needs to be able to carry more cows in order to sell more calves, in order to justify the expense of the investment she's got in hay-making machinery and so forth. And we went out and looked at a farm yesterday. This just come up for sale. And then we came home, found out what the asking price was, and started doing some figuring on the kitchen table. And you know, it is just about impossible to figure out how she could buy that land and even pay the interest on it, because she'd have to borrow practically all the purchase price. Raising beef cattle. And I know that that is a problem for young farmers all over the country. It is now economically impossible for family farming as a system to regenerate itself. You know, there's a lot of old farmers that can hang on and farm for the rest of their days because they got their farms at a relatively low cost. They got a lot of equity and all the rest of it, and their obligation to pay interest and principal may be worked down pretty small. So they can hang on for the rest of their lives, come almost hell or high water. But you can't buy a farm today at current market prices and borrow the money at current interest rates and earn enough at current farm prices to pay your interest and principal after paying your production costs and having something for your wife and kids. It can't be done. And if that can't be done, family farming cannot regenerate itself. The only people, young people who can farm are the ones who inherit some land and get a start in life, or the very small minority that might be set up in business through some government program. And so if the family farming system cannot regenerate itself, we know that the existing old farmers aren't going to last forever, even though they can hang on for the rest of their days. Then we're going to have a different kind of farming system, whether we like it or not, sometime down the road. And so that's a very serious concern for the young farmers who want to farm but can't, but it's also a serious concern for the American people. Well, how did we get into this fix? Let's just take a little look back for about more or less to the beginning of our own experience late, about 50 years or so. You're all familiar with the Farmers Union's action triangle. You know, education is the base, then one side is legislative action, the other side is economic action, cooperative action. Well, the Farmers Union started out emphasizing the cooperative side. And it is said, and has never been contradicted, that the Farmers Union has started more co-ops than everybody else in the United States put together. And I believe that. We've started co-ops all over. Many of them failed. But most of the co-ops in this central part of the country that are now successful were started by the Farmers Union. Not only the Farmers Union Central Exchange and the Farmers Union Grain Terminal Association, but Farmarco and many others all through this area. But the cooperative approach ran up against the Depression in the 1930s and could not solve the farmers' problem. Great as the progress was that it has made, and tremendous as the service has been, the cooperatives have given to farmers. And then the Farmers Union switched over to a new tack. The Farmers Union called together the farm organizations of the United States, and that group of farm organizations joined in supporting political action to establish a parity program based on supporting prices at a relationship to parity. And that started the recovery programs of the New Deal era. Now, it's important to remember that that was a bipartisan farm program. We had a bipartisan political commitment to programs to help farmers in those days. Republicans as well as Democrats from farming areas supported the ever-normal granary idea, supported the idea of price support loans to establish a floor price, then with a release price somewhat above the loan so that the temporary surpluses could be stored until the market would be short, and then they could flow back into the market. That program was established in the 40s under the New Deal, under the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt, under the presidency of Harry Truman. It came to its best flowering. Farm prices never averaged below parity during Harry Truman's presidency for 8 long years and more. But then, under Ezra Taft Benson, the Secretary of Agriculture, now about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the Republican Party deserted its commitment to parity for farmers. And the Republican administration began to wreck the farm programs. There was a brief reversal when Kennedy was president, but then the Vietnam War intervened and the terrible decade of the 1960s interrupted that, and we got back in the 1970s to a continuation of the wrecking of farm programs. Now the wreckage is just about completed. And farmers have been severely disappointed, the Farmers Union among them, by the Carter administration. We have a Democratic administration headed by a farmer as president, the farmer for Secretary of Agriculture, and that Democratic administration, like the Republicans 20 years ago, has now repudiated the parity idea. Well, you're all familiar with this, but why? Why has this happened? Well, I think that the answer is quite simple. The politicians in this country, generally, both parties, the majority of politicians now perceive that farm prices are the easiest part of the cost of living to keep down. And so we now have a cheap food policy, a bipartisan cheap food policy that makes farmers the scapegoat for everybody else's inflation. You can't really come out and say that politically, that just won't fly. American people believe in fair play, and so that is not an adequate explanation. So we get various kinds of excuses. They tell us that there's a great surplus of grain that is forcing prices down, that there's a world free market, and it's the forces of supply and demand that are forcing farm prices down. Well, it just isn't true. The fact of the matter is that the supply of grain in this world is tight. Now that's hard to believe. We've just harvested the all-time record U.S. corn crop. But don't ever forget that we now have an all-time record human population also. And we're going to have the second record world grain crop this year, second only to 1976. But in 1977, we had an all-time record population greater than in 76. And in 1977, we ate more than we produced of grain. And this year, the population is going up some more. So you just can't be overwhelmed because we have a record grain crop in the world year by year. We have more and more people all the time. And there's never any question but what each year's population will be a record beating the year before. And so we need to have more grain every year. By 1 billion bushels a year, we have to increase our grain production. By half as much as the entire U.S. wheat crop, we have to increase world production of grain just to keep up with the growth of population. Now, the truth of the matter is that the real reserve in the world right now of grain is about 10 days to 2 weeks supply. 10 days to 2 weeks supply. It is about the same percentage of annual human consumption as we had at this point in 1971. And you know what happened in 1972. And if there is a serious setback in world grain production anywhere in the world, comparable to what we experienced in 1972, or for that matter in 1974, or 1970 when we had the corn blight, or 1965 and 1966 when the India famine hit, if we have a short crop next year equal to any of those years, we're off to the races with another world food shortage. And so much for your surplus. Now, the truth of the matter is that the United States has a disproportionate part of the total grain carryover in the United States. Our marketing system doesn't work as well as some of the other countries have. And so in this cutthroat competition that we've got now, which suits the grain traders just fine, we wound up with about 100 billion bushels more of grain in our own surplus, while the rest of the world reduced their carryovers by about 300 billion bushels. In other words, the relationship switched against us by about 400 million bushels. But so much for the surplus. They say we're going to price ourselves out of the market if we raise our prices of grain. Well, by now, and it was the Farmers Union that began to publicize this, the truth of the matter is we're pricing ourselves under the market. The Japanese skim off over $5 a bushel on every bushel of wheat they buy from the United States or Canada or Australia before they sell it to their flour millers. That's twice as much and more than everything that the farmer gets in the exporting country at sheer profit to the Japanese treasury. And that's one reason that the yen is so strong and the dollar is so weak. But they're not alone. The Europeans have a tax of $3.50 a bushel on wheat, $3.20 on corn. They raise the price to the price that their own farmers get before they let it get into their own economy. You can't blame them for that. They're trying to protect their agriculture. They are not ready to run their farmers off the land and crowd them into the cities and add to their unemployment problem. And that's their business. But why doesn't the United States? Why don't we cooperate with other countries and raise our price at least to the cost of production, instead of insisting on giving away our grain at less than the market price? And another excuse, they say that if we keep the price up at the cost of production, we'll stimulate production of grain. Well, believe me, we need to stimulate the production of grain in this world. We've got to produce 1 billion bushels a year more each year than the year before in order to keep up with even the present inadequate diet of the human population. And when peace breaks out in the Middle East, if, as we all should pray, peace will come to Egypt and Israel, you are going to see an explosion of economic activity in that part of the world. You will see those oil dollars withdrawn from the American banks and the German banks, the Swiss banks, and starting to get spent and invested in that part of the world. And that will put people to work. And those people who will go to work will start to eat. They'll start to buy food. And the demand will explode. And we will need to stimulate production. And our government knows it very well. And furthermore, while they are telling farmers that they have to accept prices of less than the cost of production, out of the other side of their mouth, the very same government is subsidizing the expansion of agricultural production all over the world in the developing countries, providing technical assistance and subsidies. And the big grain traders, who are the architects of this kind of an argument, are out there receiving the subsidies, participating in the expansion of agricultural production in Brazil and the Sudan and Thailand and other countries around the world. So that's another phony excuse. Well, all of these excuses are straight old grain trade propaganda. And some of us who've been around for 25, 30, 40 years have been listening to it all that time, and we have never taken it very seriously. But unfortunately, now you have a new situation down in the Department of Agriculture. You know, all of the Department of Agriculture bureaucrats that came off the farm about the time that I was a farm boy and went into the farm programs and became the senior civil servants up through the Kennedy-Johnson administration. All of those people have now died and retired. And there's hardly a one of them left that has experience with the Truman administration, much less with the Roosevelt administration. And now the Department of Agriculture is full of bright young men and women who did not come off the farms and who see, if they want to get ahead in the world, that they ought to do like Clarence Palmby did, and Dick Goodman did, and Glenn Weir did, and Carol Bruntaber did, and any number of the rest of them, work their way up through the Department of Agriculture into a fat job with the grain company. And so you have in the Department of Agriculture today people who parrot this grain company line about surpluses and pricing ourselves out of the market and keeping the price down to retard production in other countries and all the rest of it. Well, now that's something about the fix we're in. You know, in our time, in the Farmers Union and in farm policy, talking now of your older generation, we thought that the job was to persuade the government. We spent a lifetime trying to persuade the government to hold farm prices up. I think the world has turned. And I think that your generation is going to have to be concerned with persuading the government not to keep farm prices down too low. Now that doesn't sound like it makes much sense right now when farm prices are right down at the bottom as it is. And most farmers can't believe it, because it's hard to believe that there really is such a short food situation as actually there is in the world. But that is the objective situation. And if you look around at what the government is doing, you've got to acknowledge that the primary thing that a government is doing today is aimed at keeping prices down. You remember the export embargoes in 1973. It didn't take long to figure out what to do when the price of soybeans and wheat started going up. And the same Republican administration that had talked about a free market and getting the government out of agriculture intervened, repudiated private contracts and all the rest of it in order to break the price. And the same thing happened again in 1975 and in 1974 and 75. And the very same grain companies that talk about a free market, the very same grain companies in defiance of the law got together and agreed not to stop selling grain to the Russians in order to break the price. Now that is a restricted trade and it is against the law. And it doesn't make any difference if the government asked them to do it, as the government did. It is nevertheless against the law. Now some of the grain companies ran advertising trying to get themselves off the hook with farmers, blaming the government for it, charging that it broke the price by 50 cents and more per bushel to farmers, and I think that that's a modest estimate. But they don't explain that there was no law that compelled them to do what the government asked them to do, to combine together and break the price, but that's what they did. And now we are living under a standby embargo deal worked out with the Russian government, which the Russians had no choice but to accept. And it too is designed to keep the price down. It is an agreement which requires the Russians to come in and ask our government how much they can buy from American farmers. And in my judgment, the existence of that standby embargo with the Russians is keeping grain prices down today, lower than they would be without it. I think that the Russians would like to buy more grain than the 6 or 8 million ton minimum permitted under that agreement. I think it galls them, and you can imagine why it should gall them, to have to ask permission. No other country has to ask permission whether they can buy our grain or not at the so-called market price. But I think that that is inhibiting the potential sales to the Russians, and I think it is also inhibiting the potential for sales to China. And this experience is inhibiting the confidence of our customers in the United States as reliable suppliers of grain. The production of soybeans in Brazil was 1 million metric tons in 1970. In 1978, it is 10 million metric tons. It has increased 10 times in the past 8 years, and is going further and faster. And the Japanese are putting money into it, the Arabs are putting money into it, and everybody who needs to consume soybeans, oil and meal, are putting their money on Japan and Thailand, Brazil, and Africa for all the production that they can possibly get at our expense. So we're losing our market. Well, how can we get out of this space? I don't think it's at all simple. I think it's a very tough problem. We're the most poorly organized of any farmers of any of the industrialized, modern, advanced countries. We're the most poorly organized of any large productive group in the United States. And by poorly organized, I mean that we do not, in our country, in our systems, and in our organizations, we do not have control over the supply of what it is we've got to sell. Just contrast our situation as farmers with the coal miners just a few months ago. Now, there aren't as many coal miners in the United States as there are farmers. And the coal miners' union is very weak. And the problems that it's got are common knowledge to everybody. But still, the United States has got to have coal. There doesn't seem to be any convenient way that we can get coal except by if we persuade the coal miners to dig it. And so we had a long, tough strike, and we came across and are paying higher wages to get our coal done. Or consider what's going to go on with the Teamsters Union in the next few months. They too want more money for driving trucks. And they can bring the country to a standstill if they stop driving trucks, if they go out on strike. And I'm willing to bet that they're going to get a sizable increase in their wages before this is all through. And that's the situation across the board. Every other productive group has the power to bargain for the pay they're going to get for what it is they've got to sell, their labor or their goods or their services. And farmers do not. And we have to somehow organize across the board, across our commodity lines, to the point where we can control a significant part of our supply. Our grain co-ops are taking steps to do that. We formed the Farmers Export Company, a cooperative of cooperatives that is getting set to have a bigger role in the grain export business. That is a step in the right direction. We've got to hope that we can bring more of the grain into cooperative marketing channels and more of the cooperatives into the Farmers Export Company until we have enough of the supply organized cooperatively so that we can have something effective to say about the price. We need to do the same kind of thing with other farm commodities. Somehow we have got to put together a farmer-controlled livestock marketing system in this country so that we can bring some sense and chaos and efficiency into our marketing system for livestock. We've got to do it with small commodities like tomatoes and others, and with the biggest commodities of all that we've got. Our dairy farmers are fairly well organized. They do a fairly good job. But we've got to improve our farm organizations and make them effective across the board, and as well as up and down the marketing chain, from the farmer to the consumer. We've got to organize horizontally like other productive groups in this country are, and like other farmers are organized in other countries. The Canadian Wheat Board system illustrates the general idea of what we need to shoot for in this country, even though we may follow a different pattern. All the wheat in Canada is marketed by the Canadian Wheat Board as agents of the farmer. They get the best price they can, and they pool the results among all the Canadian farmers. We can accomplish very much the same results in our country if we have a decent price support system. I don't think we can accomplish it unless we can get the government to support and acquiesce in whatever it is we do. We are going to have the government in our business, and we've got to do the best we can to get the government at least to play fair and square with us. If we had a reasonable price support loan, the Farmers Union advocates 90% of parity as a price support floor for grain, 110% parity as the release price when our temporary surpluses go back into the market. That's about $4.75 to $5.80 a bushel for wheat, comparable prices for corn and barley. George McGovern suggested $4 a bushel as a minimum floor as a step in negotiations with the Canadian senators a few weeks ago. Senator Bellman, the Republican of Oklahoma, proposed a $6 ceiling price or release price for the surpluses when the senators from Canada came to Washington just about a week ago. Well, something within that range, I think, would satisfy most American farmers, and certainly would greatly improve the farm situation and get us on the right track. And what we're up to in our work with our American senators and with the Canadians is really to show that it can be done, so that we can bring political pressure on our executive branch to start to do it. I hope that we can get something done through that means, but we've got to keep trying. But at the same time, we're going to have to reform our farm organizations, making them better and stronger. And that is a job for Farmers Union leadership. We have a generation of work to do in improving and strengthening and moving forward with our cooperatives and our farm organizations. And that's a job for Farmers Union leadership, for you young people and other young Farmers Union people in other states. And it's going to require commitment, understanding, and the readiness to cooperate with other farm organizations and with the cooperative leadership which serves us along with our general farm organizations. And I think we have a fighting chance. You have a fighting chance to save your own economic necks and to save our family farming system so that you can pass it on to your children and your young farmers 30 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob, for that stirring talk that you've just given us. And we really need to recess this meeting and get those of you back over to the arena who are going, and I hope that all of you will, for a program that will begin over there at 7 o'clock. So thank you for coming, and visit among yourselves.